The first time Alma saw the man who would become her husband, he held a kerosene lantern to her face like he was inspecting livestock. His breath reeked of pipe ash and rot. She was 17, rail-thin from the train ride west, stomach hollow from days of cheap biscuits and silence. Her name had been printed in neat cursive on a ledger in his hands, alongside the words mail-order bride. Paid in full, she didn't cry. She hadn't cried in 2 years. She came from Ohio, grew up on the edge of a rotting orchard, youngest of 5, and the only one left after the fever burned through the house like judgment. Her cousin had arranged the bride contract through a church-sponsored bulletin, her passage secured by a Kansas man who'd lost 2 wives to childbirth and wanted a third to try again. The letter he'd sent was short, quiet girl preferred. God-fearing, strong hips a plus. His name was Vern Cadell, 41, sun-spotted, shoulders like oxen yoke. He lived 2 miles east of the Salton settlement, where the prairie met badland scrub. He greeted Alma without warmth, took her trunk without asking, and led her to a buckboard wagon hitched with a mule that flinched at shadows. She watched the town recede behind them like a door slamming shut. Vern's house sat alone on the plains, 1 room, no porch. Inside was a cot, a stove, a Bible, and the faint smell of spoiled meat. That first night, he told her where to sleep, how to wash herself, when to cook. He didn't hit her, not yet, but he watched her with eyes like flint. She learned quickly how to read his silences, how to move without noise, how to count his drinks and disappear before the last one tipped him over the edge. By spring, the bruises came, first on her wrist from when she'd overboiled the coffee, then her cheek for answering too slow. Vern believed in correction the way preachers believed in sin. "You got to be shaped," he said, voice low as a storm rolling in. "Wives don't come finished." She was pregnant by summer, miscarried by autumn. He blamed her, called her womb cursed, poured lye into the chicken feed, and forced her to dig a new coop with bare hands. When the snow came, she slept with a knife under the straw mattress, not to use, just to remember it was there. On the last day of February, a boy rode in from Salton with news of a cattle auction. Vern left before sunrise with a sack of coins and a pistol, riding hard. Alma waited 1 hour, then 2, then 3. At the 4th, she pulled on her boots and stepped into the snow. She walked west without stopping. No coat, no food. Just a rusted tin of bacon fat wrapped in cloth and a locket that hadn't opened in years. She followed the fence line of a broken ranch, crossed a half-frozen creek, and watched the clouds bleed violet over the plain. When she collapsed, it was beside an old cattle trail. She didn't expect to wake up, but someone found her, and that changed everything. The first thing Alma noticed when she woke was the heat. A dry, steady warmth wrapped around her like a blanket pulled from a stove. Then the smell, cedar smoke, faint horse sweat, something boiling low on a fire. Her mouth tasted of rust. Her fingers twitched, but she couldn't sit up. Not yet. A man's voice reached her, not close, not kind, but calm. "She's not dead." It came from behind her through a doorway. The speaker didn't bother to check if she'd heard. He wasn't talking to her anyway. Alma opened her eyes. The ceiling above was timber, thick-beamed and tar-dark. The room small, square, but solid. Her skin itched from wool blankets, her coat, her dress, gone. She was wrapped in a shirt too large, sleeves rolled at the wrist. A kettle hissed on the stove. She tried to speak, but her throat cracked dry. A cup appeared in her hand, just like that. She hadn't seen the man cross the floor. His hands were calloused, square-nailed. He didn't look at her when she drank. "You were froze near to death." "Another hour out there, and the coyotes have saved me the trouble." His voice was low and unhurried, not cruel, not soft either, measured like everything about him. He looked around 40, weather-bitten skin, beard patchy with gray. One eye squinted more than the other, and his right hand bore an old burn scar, healed crooked. His name, she'd learn later, was Eli Cutter. He lived alone. The cabin sat on the edge of a wind-blown rise, no sign of fence or field, just raw country curling in every direction. His horses were lean and quiet, his food plain and spare. There was no Bible in the house, no family photograph, no woman's presence anywhere. Yet everything was neat, tools hung, blankets folded, floors swept. Alma didn't speak much those first days. She watched, took in the silence. Her body healed slowly, feet blistered, palms raw, ribs aching from exposure. Eli didn't ask questions. He brought her broth, gave her his bed without comment, slept on the floor by the stove. When she tried to thank him, he shook his head once and walked out into the wind. It was 6 days before she managed to rise and help with the firewood. He didn't stop her. "You get strong or you die," he said. "Ain't no third way." She split logs beside him in silence. He worked shirtless in the cold, arms roped with old muscle. His presence didn't scare her. He never raised his voice, never reached sudden. He didn't drink. And when she flinched, once, when a log slipped and clattered, he only paused, steady-eyed, then went back to work like nothing had happened. On the 8th night, he asked her name. "Alma," she said, "where's your home?" She didn't answer. He nodded, accepting that. The fire crackled between them. She caught his eyes then, just for a moment, and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Not pity. Not curiosity, recognition. He knew something about running, about being lost, about living past what should have killed you. Over the weeks, they settled into rhythm. She cooked while he hunted. She cleaned the rifle while he patched the roof. Words remained scarce, but they weren't needed. She watched the land thaw and felt herself thaw with it. Her nightmares grew less sharp. The knife under her mattress stayed untouched, but spring never comes clean in Kansas. One morning brought hoofbeats on the trail, a rider too fast, dust clouding behind. Eli rose with his rifle before the sound reached the cabin door. "Stay inside," he told her. She didn't. The rider was Sheriff Boyd, a narrow-jawed man with a badge rusted from disuse. He spat tobacco, glanced once at Alma, then squared his shoulders. "Looking for a woman," he said. "Mail-order bride gone missing. Husband says she stole from him." Eli didn't blink. "See any woman here?" he asked. The sheriff looked past him into the dark cabin. "I'll take a look." "You won't." The two men stood a breath apart. Alma felt her heart clench. Eli's hand was at his belt, but not on the gun, just near it, enough to warn. Sheriff Boyd narrowed his eyes. "You want trouble." "I want peace. You ride on now, you might keep it." There was silence, wind in the grass. A horse shifted. Then the sheriff spat again, turned his reins, and rode out slow. Eli watched him vanish into the heat mirage. When he came back inside, he said nothing, just poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to her. His hand brushed hers, warm and scarred. She gripped the cup tight, knuckles white. She knew then. He wouldn't ask her to stay, but he wouldn't ask her to leave either. The rains came late that year. By April, the ground was split with thirst, and the creek that traced the south edge of Cutter's land ran thin as ribbon thread. Days were slow, heavy with heat, and the wind no longer cut like glass but carried the scent of dust and sage. Alma had taken to rising before dawn. She liked the silence before birdsong, when the world hadn't yet decided what kind of day it would be. She walked the edge of the rise, boots soft on hard-packed soil, and practiced breathing without fear. That more than anything was new. Eli had begun teaching her the rifle. He never called it that. Just handed it to her one morning with a nod, as if it were a spoon or a broom, nothing special, just something she ought to know. She held it like she'd held everything since escaping Vern, tight, ready, half afraid of what it might bring. "You shoot slow," he said, watching her brace, "but steady, that matters more." He taught her how to track prints in dry ground, how to field strip the rifle, how to smell the difference between mule sweat and wet leather. They never spoke of why she needed to learn. They didn't have to. By early May, Alma could skin a jackrabbit without flinching. She could patch a roof, mend a saddle strap, and split a man's lip in her sleep, though she never told Eli about the dreams. They came less often now, but when they did, they left her breathless, clawing at invisible hands. One night, thunder rolled far off, and she stood outside barefoot, letting the wind lift her hair. Eli came to the doorway, leaned against it. "Storm's coming," he said. "I know." She didn't move, he didn't ask her to. That was the shape of them. No declarations, no embraces, just the constant pull of gravity, wordless, certain. She wasn't sure what he was to her yet. Sanctuary, yes, maybe more, maybe not. All she knew was that she slept easier with him near, and when he left for town that week, a knot curled in her gut until she saw his horse return over the ridge. But peace in Kansas never lasted, not when men remembered your name. She was hauling water when she saw the tracks, deep and wide from hooves not cut her. 2 riders, heavy, recent. She didn't wait, she ran. Eli was in the lean-to, repairing a bridle. "Riders came," she said, breath tight. 2. He stood without speaking, moved to the cabin, pulled the rifle from its peg. She grabbed the pistol, hers now, though she hadn't fired it in weeks. Her hands were steady. The riders came slow over the hill, one whistling, the other with a hat low to shadow his face. Alma felt her blood chill before she saw him fully. Vern, he looked the same, mean-eyed. Leather vest stained from age and rage. The other man was younger, maybe a cousin or hired hand. Both carried rifles. Vern dismounted with a grunt, his boot hitting the dirt like a coffin lid closing. "Well, I'll be," he said, voice greasy with false joy. "Didn't reckon you'd land yourself a new roost, Alma." Eli stepped forward, gun low but ready. "You're trespassing." "I'm here for what's mine," Vern said. "She signed a contract. That makes her property." Eli didn't move. "You want to test that theory, you go ahead." Vern spit near Alma's boots. "Girl's a thief. Ran off with my money, my mule, and my name." Alma didn't flinch. "You think I kept your name?" That made him snarl. He stepped closer. Eli's rifle rose half an inch. "Back up," he said, voice flat. The second man shifted, unsure now. His eyes flicked between Vern and Eli, then landed on Alma, and she saw something in them, doubt. Maybe even guilt. He didn't want a gunfight, but Vern did. "You're harboring a runaway bride," Vern spat. "The law's on my side." "She's no runaway," Eli said. "She survived you, big difference." The air held tight. Then Vern moved fast toward his holster, but not fast enough. Eli shot him clean through the thigh. The sound split the silence. The second man dropped his rifle. Alma didn't move, just stood over Vern as he writhed in the dirt, howling like a gutted hog. "You try again," Eli said, leveling his rifle. "Next bullet goes through the neck." They bound Vern's leg and left him for the law to find. Alma packed his pistol into the shed, deep in a box under salted hides. She didn't need it anymore. That night rain came hard, hammering the roof in waves. Alma sat by the stove, Eli across from her. She looked at his hands, steady, scarred, capable. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He met her eyes. "Yes, I did." And she believed him. They thought it was over, but men like Vern Cadell didn't die easy, and he didn't forget. The sheriff from Salton came 2 days after the shooting, riding slow, hat in hand, mouth tight with forced apology. Vern had lived, though just barely, dragged himself bleeding to a sod house 10 miles east. Claimed he'd been ambushed, tried to spin it into bandit trouble. But Sheriff Boyd wasn't a fool. Word traveled. The younger man who'd ridden with Vern turned witness before the sun set. No charges were pressed. Cutter's land was beyond the reach of town law anyhow. Still, it changed things. Eli kept the rifle closer now. Alma woke at the sound of hawks. They slept with boots near the door. Not afraid, not exactly, but watchful. Summer deepened. The creek dried to rock. The prairie shimmered with heat, snakes sunning on fence posts, dust choking the sky. Eli and Alma built a second lean-to, hauled stone for a smokehouse, started cutting a path down to where a new well might go. It was work that looked like permanence, like claiming something that might be theirs. They didn't talk of what to call it, not a home yet, not quite, but the pieces were there. One morning Alma found a calf alone at the tree line, legs trembling, half-starved. No brand, no mother, just bone and fear. She coaxed it back with bread scraps, made a pen with rope and will, and sat beside it for hours, whispering until it stopped shaking. "You always choose the ones with no fight left," Eli said softly. "No," she answered. "I choose the ones no one else waits for." He nodded like he understood. The nights grew longer, cooler. The wind changed direction. September came with gold leaves and brittle mornings. It happened the night after the first frost. Alma woke to the low whine of a horse. She rose without sound, crept to the window. A shape moved by the barn, too smooth to be animal, too slow to be friend. She tapped Eli's shoulder. He was awake already. They didn't speak, just moved. Alma took the pistol now, her grip solid. Eli slipped out the back, shadow among shadows. The wind masked their steps. She held by the window, heart a hard drum. Then noise, a clatter, a sharp grunt. She ran. Behind the barn, in the pale moonlight, Eli stood over a figure pinned to the dirt. A boy, maybe 17, wiry, scared to death. His lip bled, his hands shook. "I wasn't gonna take nothin'," he stammered. "Swear it." "Just hungry." Eli looked down at him, jaw locked. "Who sent you?" Alma asked. "No one, I seen the smoke, figured maybe you had scraps." She looked at his boots, too new, at his belt, a little too fine. "Who was it?" she repeated. The boy's shoulders sagged. "Cadell." "Of course, he said he'd pay me to scout the place. Said you were his wife, and the man here'd taken you." Alma's breath caught, fury sharp in her throat. "He say where he is." The boy nodded. "Camped near the old Bramble Pass, other side of Snake Ridge. 4 of 'em, said they'd ride at dawn." Eli let him go. "Run back," he said. "Tell him we're waitin'." The boy bolted. They had hours, maybe less. They didn't waste them. Eli showed Alma the hidden rifle pit on the north rise, dug years before for rustlers that never came. He staked a trip line by the shed, set a lantern behind the barn to cast false shadows. Alma loaded every round, cleaned the barrels, checked the sightlines from the lean-to roof. And when the sky paled into gray, they waited. The attack came just after first light. 4 riders, fast and low, guns drawn. One took the trip line and fell hard, another peeled off, hit the false trail and circled wide. Vern led the charge. Alma saw him clear through the scope, his sneer, his rage, his need. She could have shot him then, but she didn't. She fired at his horse instead. The beast screamed and bucked, throwing Vern into the brush. His leg hit a stump, cracked loud. The other men hesitated. Eli shot once, twice. One rider fell, the other fled. The quiet after was thunderous. Alma found Vern crawling, pistol in hand, eyes wild. She stepped on his wrist before he could lift it. "You don't own me," she said. He spat. "You'll always be mine." She pressed harder. He screamed. "No," she said. "I chose this life. You're just the blood I paid to earn it." She let go, left him whimpering. They handed him to the sheriff again. This time with more than wounds, with witnesses, with intent. He wouldn't leave jail again. That evening Alma sat beside the calf, its ribs rising slow, its eyes half closed. Eli came with a flask of warmed cider. They drank without speaking. But she saw it then in his eyes. He didn't see her as something broken anymore. He saw her as what she'd become, and it was enough. The jail in Salton burned that winter. No one could say how. The sheriff swore it was faulty stove pipe, Others muttered about oil-soaked rags and vengeance carried by kin. Either way, the roof caved before the frost melted from the walls. 3 inmates died in the fire. Vern Cadell was not among them. His cell had been empty. When the news reached Cutter's Land, Eli said nothing. Just cleaned both rifles and left them loaded by the hearth. Alma didn't ask where he went that night, only that he came back before dawn, boots crusted with frost, eyes hard. After that, life cinched tighter. They fenced the north edge of the rise, set snares along the back trail. Alma planted thorn bush along the creek and stacked stones for a watch post. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was preparation. It was knowing the wind could change, and when it did, you had better be ready to stand in it. Then a letter came, rode in by a boy too young to shave, sealed in cracked wax with no return mark. Alma opened it with a blade. Inside, 5 words scrawled in a hand she hadn't seen since her wedding day. Still yours, always I'm coming. She burned it without speaking. But that night she loaded her pistol slow, not with fear, with finality. You could leave, Eli said, voice low, steady. I can buy you passage east. No one would find you. Alma shook her head. I didn't come here to run. The snow broke early that year. Spring rose raw from the soil, everything sharp-edged and wet. The calf grew, found its legs, followed Alma like shadow. She named him Gristle. It made Eli laugh just once. That was enough. They began clearing new ground, talking of hens, maybe a second room to the cabin. But always the question hung in the silence. When would he come? The answer arrived with a black horse. April, late. The kind of day where sun came quick, then vanished behind thick cloud. Alma was cutting kindling. Eli was down at the creek. She saw him crest the ridge. Vern, not limping, not burned, but changed. Thinner, meaner, eyes sunk deep. He rode alone, slow, like he meant to be seen. Rifle on his saddle, knife at his hip. Alma didn't go for her gun. She stepped out, hands bare. He dismounted 5 paces away. I told you, he said, you're mine. I remember, she said. He looked at the house, at the lean-to, the worn trail by the barn. His lip curled. You think this life makes you clean? No, she said, just mine. He stepped forward. She didn't move. You gonna shoot me? He asked. She shook her head. Not yet. He laughed then, a dry, ragged sound. You think he can keep you, that he's different. They're all the same, Alma, you'll see, they turn. She let the silence answer. He drew the knife. Then Eli's voice cut through the air. That's far enough. Vern turned. Eli stood near the cabin, rifle aimed, still, breath even. You take one more step, and I end it here. Vern sneered. You think she's worth dying for? No, Eli said. She's worth living for. Alma moved first, not toward the gun. Toward Vern, he turned, startled. The blade lifted. She slammed into him full force, hand locking his wrist, twisting hard. He stumbled back, struck a root, fell. She straddled him, knife clattering away. She could have killed him, right there, no court, no jury, but she didn't. She took the pistol from her belt, pressed it into his ribs, and waited until he pissed himself. Then she stood. You don't get to haunt me anymore, she said. You die when the law says so, not me. They bound him, rode him into Salton. This time they didn't give him a cell, they gave him a rope. By summer the town had a new sheriff, a younger one who remembered what Vern had done. No one protested the hanging. Alma didn't watch. She stayed by the creek that day. Dug her hands into the warm earth, planted seeds. Later, when Eli returned, she was still there, dirt on her knees, sweat on her brow. She looked up at him. Now we build, she said, and they did. The rains came hard that year, loud as hooves on a chapel floor. Thunder cracked like rifle fire over the plains, and the sky stayed bruised for weeks. Cutter's roof held. The walls did not leak. For once, the storm stayed outside. Alma planted squash, beans, and tobacco. The soil took it easy, warm from spring, wet from heaven. She learned the pattern of the land, where the shadow held past noon, where the wind curled in low hollows. Gristle roamed freely now, full grown, scarred from some fight with a barbed fence but calm under her hand, just like her. They built a smokehouse with cedar beams, hauled stone from the south ravine. Cutter dug the foundation. Alma poured the mortar. Neither said what it meant, but it was there in every brick. This place was no longer a hiding ground. It was a claim. One morning, Alma rode out past Snake Ridge alone, first time since the burning of the jail. She carried no rifle, just a hatchet, a canteen, and the silence she'd earned. The land was greener than she remembered, taller grass, fat crows. The wind no longer whispered her old name. She camped overnight beneath a dying pine, drank river water, stared at the stars like they might write her future in dust and fire. In the dark, she felt no fear. When she returned, Cutter was in the field, shirt off, back shining with sweat. She dismounted slow, watched him work. His hands were blistered, arms crisscrossed with the scars of old burns, brush scrapes, the kind of wounds a life leaves behind. She walked to him, took the hoe from his hands, and kissed him. They did not speak of love. They spoke of harvest, of fowl, of fence posts. But in the way they touched, small, quiet, without demand, there was a tenderness sharper than anything carved in vows. One night, as cicadas screamed into dusk, Cutter took a cedar box from the loft. Inside, a deed, handwritten, signed years before, his land, his alone. He laid it in her lap. "I want your name on it." Alma looked at him long. "I don't have one," she said. "You do now." He didn't press, and she didn't refuse. Weeks passed. Then from the south trail, riders came again, 3 men, not fast, not armed as far as she could tell, government men by their clothes. One dismounted, dusty boots cracking against dry grass. "Miss Alma," he said. She didn't answer. He pulled a paper from his coat, unrolled it slow. It bore the seal of a Kansas circuit court. "This is to confirm final judgment in the matter of Cadell v. Alma Cadell," he said. "By failure to appear and through corroborated testimony, the court has ruled in your favor." He handed her the paper. "He's dead. And the debt tied to your name died with him." She didn't take it. "I paid already," she said, "with blood, with years." "I know," the man said, "but the law wanted its say." He tipped his hat, rode on. Alma burned the paper without reading it. She didn't need forgiveness printed on a court seal. By late autumn, the smokehouse was full. Jerky hung in neat lines. The linta had a real roof now, and Alma kept her tools sharp and sorted. Cutter built her a workbench from pine. She carved her initials beneath it. One night she stood outside while the moon rose high, casting pale light across the field. Cutter came behind her, arms around her waist, rough hands warm. "Do you ever wish it had gone different?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, "No, I just wish I started sooner." He nodded, pressed his cheek to hers. They stood that way for a long time. No words. Just the wind and the dark and the weight of what they'd survived. Not all stories end with vengeance. Some end with a woman still breathing, and a man who chose to stand beside her, not over her. The land didn't care who they were. But it let them stay. Winter returned without apology. The wind came first, screaming low over the prairie, scouring the grass down to root. Then came the frost, white-laced fences, slick stone, the kind of cold that found bone no matter how thick the blanket. Alma moved slower now, not from fear, but from a settled kind of strength. She knew this land, knew its moods. It no longer surprised her. She built a root cellar by then, stocked with potatoes and preserves, all sealed tight beneath earth and stone. Gristle had grown thick, shoulders broad, eyes wary but calm. He slept near the cabin now, a quiet guardian. Cutter carved wooden buttons in the evenings, not for need, for the quiet rhythm of it. Alma stitched leather, made saddlebags from an old coat, taught herself how to bind pages. At night they read aloud, books from Salton, worn with use, the words rising slow and soft through the dark. Neither spoke of the past much anymore. They didn't have to, but sometimes Alma felt it stirring. Not regret, not quite memory, more like a scar beneath the skin, reminding her what she'd outlived. One morning in January she rode east. Alone, she didn't tell Cutter why, but he knew. She left at dawn, rifle strapped across her back, a tin of jerky in her satchel. The snow was thick, but her horse moved steady. It took her 2 days to find it, the old homestead, Vern's house, or what remained of it. She stood on the porch, or what had been a porch, the boards now rotted, the roof half caved. The front door hung loose on its hinge, creaking like a throat clearing. Inside, my skittered wind whistled through broken glass. She stepped in, dust and rot, a rusted stove, a child's boot in the corner, dried to leather. The floor still bore the old bloodstains, faded now, but still there if you knew how to look. She walked through each room, one step, then another. In the back, she found her old trunk, the one she'd brought west. It was empty. But the fact that it had remained felt like a message, or a dare. Alma sat down on the edge of the frame where the cot had been, closed her eyes. She thought she'd feel rage, or grief, or some final sense of closure, but she didn't. She felt nothing, and that was power, too. When she returned, Cutter was on the porch, waiting. He didn't ask where she'd gone, just reached out, took the reins from her gloved hands, and led the horse to water. That night, she told him. I went back. He didn't stop whittling, just looked up, and... She shook her head. It's gone. Whatever held me there, it's done. He nodded. They didn't say more. But that night, for the first time, she slept without dreaming. In the spring, they marked the land with stones, 4 corners, wide enough for goats, maybe sheep if the grass held strong. Cutter carved the boundary into a post, Cutter and Alma, 1881. That was the year the railroad stretched close to Salton. That was the year settlers started pouring in, fast and noisy, wearing shiny boots and newer names. Some stopped at their gate, most passed by. Alma watched them go, quiet behind the fence, hands calloused, eyes clear. One girl, barely 16, stopped to ask for water. Alma brought her a ladle and bread. The girl stared at her in wonder. Are you married? Alma glanced toward the field, where Cutter worked beside a rusted plow, shirt damp with sweat. No, she said. The girl blinked. I chose him, Alma added. That's better. And the girl nodded like she understood, even if she didn't yet. That night, Alma stood by the well and listened to the wind pass through the new grass, bending it in waves. No voices in it, no names. Just sky and earth and the rhythm between them. She wasn't a bride anymore. She wasn't a fugitive. She was a woman with a plot of land, a man who never raised his voice, and the deep, hard-won silence of survival. That was the ending she chose, and it held.